Hi, friend. Niclas here. Hope you're doing well and welcome to today's episode. On the show today, we have the producer, engineer, audio programmer, and author Peter Dowsett. And I actually met Peter a few years ago in London because we were both doing the Graham Cochrane six-figure course, whatever it's called, and I have some more opinions on that course, which we get into in the interview later on. But it was great to catch up with Peter again, see what he's been up to, and as I said, he's now doing he's an audio programmer, so he's doing his PhD in machine learning when it comes to audio applications. So it was really cool catching up with Peter to talk more about programming with audio, making plugins, and all that. So if you're into technology, programming, music. I hope you're going to enjoy this conversation as well. And also, before we get into the interview, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you are listening or watching this show. Your support really matters, and we're growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So, really appreciate your support. And also, if you want exclusive access to interviews before the public, please check out the Audio Tribe. There's a link to that in the description below. To send your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. Super easy and free, of course. And again, you get exclusive interviews before the public. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Peter Dowsett. So please enjoy.
Your lighting setup's quite nice.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, it's just experimenting, because this was supposed to be a temporary room, which it might turn out to be soon also. Because I mean, for people listening, we met in London, but since the pandemic, or maybe because of the pandemic, we were always supposed to move to Leeds, but now we live in Leeds.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm back in Coventry at the moment, my hometown, for similar reasons, I guess.
Where's Coventry again?
It's near Birmingham, so it's like maybe 20 minutes drive south of Birmingham.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've never been there. Is it a nice place?
It's like most of England, really. Like there's some, really cool cities, and then some cities that just don't have a lot going on culturally. So,
yeah.
2021 is Coventry's year to be European City of Culture. So that basically means, it's a dive. So we're going to give it a load of money to try and make it less so.
That's hilarious. Is it really the cultural city? Wow.
Yeah, for this year. And it feels just like Coventry's luck to be that during a global pandemic. So all of the artsy stuff they usually put on obviously can't be done.
yeah. I actually think I saw it on the news. I think like Channel 4 was there, and it was like this outdoor theater show taking place. I don't know if that was there. It must have been there.
It probably was, but I'm a little bit disconnected. I don't really watch the news or the TV.
Right.
I tend to be like a kind of on-demand, like Netflix and Amazon type of guy, rather.
Yeah. I think it's happened because at the moment we live with my partner's parents, so it's been sort of a ritual to watch Channel 4 during or before dinner. But now it looks like we're finally getting a place. It's been a pain, real pain. But so, are you planning to go back to London, or are you staying in Coventry?
Not sure yet, to be honest. I'm going to see what happens. I'm doing, as well as my work for Relab, I'm doing a PhD scholarship. So that'll involve teaching 1 day a week at the University of West London. So I kind of have to balance whether it's worth commuting or whatnot. So I've been putting off that sort of decision because I'm back with my parents as well at the moment, and it's just allowed me loads of time to actually save some money to buy a place. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, so that's a similar situation for you both, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like we actually moved to Leeds in December. Like the flat we had in London, my partner's fiance's flat. We had a buyer several months in, and we moved to Leeds when we were about to complete, and then not obviously, but then she pulled out.
Yeah.
So we were stuck with the flat. and therefore stuck here too. And
Yeah.
then we found another buyer in March, maybe that fell through.
Oh no.
Then we found another buyer, like yeah, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
That that got fucked up like 2 weeks ago, but it still looks like we might get a house in the end. Like, but it's so fucking crazy, man. Like, it's been so
Yeah.
like coming from a place like Sweden,
Yeah.
talking to my parents, oh, this is what's going on, and they're all shocked. Like, how the hell can this be happening in the UK? And it's like, I don't know. It's just your whole life is put on hold for like 3 months, and you're like, oh, we still don't know if it's being sold yet, but you're making plans. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably fucked up.
Yeah, it's a crazy system. I know a few people that have had similar things where, you know, buyers pull out or things fall through several times. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
allowed, really, but yeah.
No, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
But so, what are you then doing your PhD in? I mean, is it
Yeah.
also in programming or?
Yes, yeah, machine learning for audio applications. So
Nice.
it's basically about working out whether a technique that's used in other areas of machine learning called neural architecture search can help find more accurate models of analog gear, digital models of analog gear. So that's what I'm working towards at the moment. So yeah, it's a real eye-opening experience, you know, doing something, an undertaking like that. So yeah, it's been a big change since you obviously saw me
Yeah.
in London. Yeah, everything is kind of turned upside down.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same for me. And I mean, was it a pandemic for you, or was it leading there anyway, or what was it?
Yeah, because I was most of the way through a master's already before the pandemic hit, so it was kind of starting to lead that way. It just like made what I thought was going to be a sideline income with my own company doing plugins into kind of the main job working for someone else. So yeah, it when all the work kind of cancelled overnight, it was like, well, I can't really keep affording the studio and all the rent here, so I've just got to kind of go with it and see where it takes me. And it's kind of led me here. And at the time, there were some scholarships going at the University of West London where I was doing the masters, and they asked me if I wanted to do it. I accepted that, and then this relab opportunity came about. I wasn't even looking for jobs, and you know, because I'd done a lot of videos and production stuff for them before, I kind of
Yeah.
ended up, you know, working for them. And yeah, it's all aligned really nicely. And there was some very, very sketchy months in 2020, so I'm kind of happy that it's all stabilized. I'm sure that you've probably been in a similar situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you, but I started like a few months into the pandemic, September ish. I also got into programming, so also now working as a programmer, but in the iOS development side.
Yeah.
And but maybe for the people listening, because we met initially because we were doing this Graham Cochrane course. I forgot the name of the course, but his business course.
Yes. Yeah.
And what was your experience doing that? Because like having stopped doing that, like got some perspective on that. I think sometimes I wonder, like, was that not to shit on Graham? I think he's doing the best he can, but sometimes I find that approach of like, oh, earn six figures in only by only working 30 minutes a day, that sort of mentality. Sometimes I wonder, is that viable? Is that something? Are we buying into his dream, or that I started questioning that. I don't know what you feel.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for, you know, the people that do it really, really well can do all of that. But that takes a while to like this, and there's a bunch of skills that are underestimated, you know,
Yeah.
being able to present, being able to, you know, make cameras look good, to be able to, you know, I mean, the audio side is the easy part for us, but there's a bunch of skills there that you underestimate. And if you, I think the half an hour thing a day is like after you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years and you've slowly built something up, you know, and they underplay the amount of time that all takes
Yeah.
and overplay the results of that. So I think it's possible, but I kind of felt like, do I want to do this? Is this really the main thing that I want to do. And after doing it for 6 months, I actually found that making the videos and stuff like that kind of stressed me out in a way and took way more time than I wanted. And I was never happy with the lighting and other things. And I'm like, I was already doing this programming stuff, and I was like, well, I'll start my own plugin company and all of these things. And that felt a little bit more like an entrepreneurial venture that I could get behind a little bit more. So yeah, that's why I've pivoted over to here, and I haven't done a video for a long time and stuff. But I'm making some videos for Relab, you know, going through mixes, using the products and doing that side of things, which I actually find a lot more enjoyable because it's like much more bounded. Like I have an idea of what I'm going to do ahead of time, and it's not like me having to come up with loads of ideas all the time. And yeah, so yeah, I think there's a certain type of personality that really works for, but I found it quite stressful.
Yeah,
like,
no,
you know,
same
like,
here.
yeah, like learning an instrument, you know, it takes a long time to get to the point where you feel good at something, and I guess I wasn't really prepared for that journey.
No, and same here. But you know, I don't think that's also communicated well in those courses where, you know, everything has to happen tomorrow or yesterday, I should say. You know, in that's the sort of mentality. So you saying you were stressed, I felt stressed also because I felt, oh, I should have hit these goals now,
Yeah,
whatever those goals were, and I think maybe they were unobtainable. Also, where I was in the whole process. So yeah, I mean, like you said, there's probably people who can make a success out of it, but those are probably the people who have an audience already,
yeah,
perhaps, you
yeah,
know. So I don't know. I've been thinking about it lately, like just thinking, having perspective on it. I don't know, just I don't know, not being annoyed by them, but just I think for people who might be interested in taking them, they should be taken with a grain of salt, maybe. And there's something about being first, like
yeah,
Graham was. He was first into the space of YouTube mixing videos. That counts for a lot, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. And I
It
also
does.
think at the same time is there are certain personalities that really like take to it quickly, and yeah, I felt like that wasn't really for me. And you know, we keep looking and we keep searching, and there were certain concepts in there and values that I've incorporated in very like in different ways that's been beneficial. But yeah, like I didn't really feel like that whole thing was for me.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
But let's leave that. But it was still cool to meet you and Sarah. That was nice experience. That was a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good things like that did come out of it, and I've ended up talking to a couple of other people through those as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not negative about it, but I just
No.
felt like that route wasn't really what I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
you know, you've got to try things, haven't you, to find what really
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
for you. So how are you
Exactly.
finding
Exactly.
programming?
Yeah. Actually, I really enjoy it, and I think it's because I found it to be very similar to sound engineering in some way. You know, like it's technical, it's creative in its technicality, so to speak. You
Yeah,
know, you
yeah.
can think about something, you can create that. So I really love that, and I love that. Yeah, that side of it.
So did you end
Uh,
up doing like a boot camp or something? Like, how did you? Yeah,
yeah, boot camp. What was it called? Angela Use, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. But yeah, she has a really good iOS boot camp. So did that, bought books, got a mentor actually from my old school, like my sound engineering university.
yeah, yeah.
There was a person there who also worked as a programmer. He became a mentor, got a job, and then a new job. So yeah, that's the
Yeah, yeah.
that's the journey. And then how about you? So you were doing programming. So I assume you are into C++,
Yes, yeah,
Juice.
yeah.
Is that what you use mainly?
Yeah, mainly, yeah. So C++, Juice. I'll also do some prototyping in things like MATLAB or Python. So yeah, they're the main languages, but everything ends up in C++ eventually, and Juice is really invaluable to kind of take out some of the complexity in the sense of like making it work for AAX or VST or AU,
Right.
and
Right.
also working cross-platform across operating systems. So if you had to deal with all of that stuff, that's like a massive. That infrastructural part would actually take most of your time, and the
Right.
actual like digital signal processing code would, that part of it would be a very small part of it. So yeah, I'm glad I don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah. But so why? Because I've been looking into lately, like what it takes to make plugins, and can you do not a plugin in Swift or iOS, but that side. And I always come across, oh, you gotta use C++ because of, I don't remember why now, but why is it that C++ is the preferred way of programming with audio in?
Yeah, because it's fast. So
Right.
a lot of other languages have more abstraction, so it takes it further away from kind of machine code, and it has more things to automatically look after memory and things like that is very convenient for most programs. But when you want something to run really quickly, it being a kind of lower level language and closer to kind of assembly code and machine code, that actually makes it faster. And when you have a small buffer of samples that you need to get back out in time for the next one to arrive, speed is really, really important. So any audio visual stuff, gaming stuff, that's why those sorts of applications tend to still use C++, because it's significantly faster than other languages. It comes with its drawbacks. It's a little bit less easy to read that code and can be more fiddly. Definitely less beginner friendly compared to, say, Python or something like that. But it works really quickly.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so, and then the JUCE, is that just a big framework, or what's that? You mentioned some stuff already, but what is it exactly?
Yeah, so it's if you think about it like a collection of classes that will allow you to do common things that you need to do with audio and multimedia in general and graphics. So it encapsulates all of that. So basically it will handle all of the complex stuff that you have to do with in terms of wrapping for various different plugin formats. So VST, AU, AAX, all of that sort of stuff. It will also handle all of the platform specific stuff in terms of operating systems. So basically, there's an application that you start building from called the Producer. And that basically is where you put all of your settings in for all of these different formats and platforms. And it'll allow you to build it for different operating systems and work with a certain IDE based on those operating systems.
Right. That's cool. I mean, so when you say settings, so that's not plugin settings, so to speak. That's actually settings. So it's going to be used for this, let's say Pro Tools, right? That's what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
you'll have like settings in it to tell it where the software development kit for the AAX platform is, various different VST settings, AU settings, stuff like that, as well as like your overall project settings and even as simple as like the name of the project. Because if you have a OS X project and a Windows project, if they were you would need two completely different projects for those things.
Right.
Whereas the Producer encapsulates it all together and allows you to create a version of the project for any common IDE on those platforms. So it means that you can have this one project that's able to be used on different operating systems and be able to export various different plugin formats. And also another useful thing about JUCE is that it has a lot of graphics based stuff in it. So with a lot of programming languages, all the graphics stuff, if you had to code that all from scratch, that would also take a lot of time. So again, it's just a time saver, rather than having to deal with the deep infrastructural stuff.
Yeah. That makes sense, man.
Yeah.
But so you said, did you have your own plugin? Did you made one? Is that correct, or?
Yeah. So I'm most of the way through making a plugin called Tremolo.
Cool.
And the idea is it's like this crazy tremolo, like on kind of modest settings, it acts like a regular tremolo, but on high settings, it does this kind of crazy randomization thing that could be like the worst thing in the world, or it could be amazing, dependent on
Yeah.
on the context. It's kind of like a randomizer, and that's what the "you only live once" YOLO thing is about. It's like just a play on words for that. So
Right.
that it's doing random things, and it like, because it's random, it only happens once. So it's
Right.
like if you're recording it through, it is very unpredictable. But yeah.
That's cool. So do you mean if you actually use your plugin on a track, that means whatever it does at a certain point in time will never happen again, or would it still play the
Uh,
same thing if you go back?
Yeah, so it depends on where you've got it set. If it's set like completely 100%, there's going to be no pattern to it. Whereas at lower settings, there's definitely like oscillations to it. And yeah, a lot of the settings are triggered by LFOs and stuff. So that will mean that it is predictable. So yeah, you'd have to set it to absolutely, because it's not very useful if it's completely random, unless you're like doing this kind of Brian Eno thing where you just want to throw like crazy creativity to it and you're recording it straight through. And I've coded it so that it does that if you want to do it. But yeah, like that's going to be like once in a while when you want to try to do something completely crazy. And I don't intend people to use it all the time. But yeah.
That's really cool, man. But so can you take us through like where do you start on a project like that, and where, I mean, we don't know where it ends exactly now, but still, like, how do you start? What happens in the middle? And because I guess you don't just sit down and program straight away. It takes some planning, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And so how does that whole process work when creating plugins?
I mean, in general, like this particular project started as a kind of university style project that I just wanted to do something. And I thought, well, what's going to be simple enough, but I can kind of reinvent and do something that no one's done before. So that's kind of how that came about. But I think, in general, it's about just starting with an idea of like, I wish I was able to do this, and then kind of work backwards from that. So
Right.
that, innate creativity of just feeling like I wish I could do this, and then kind of making that a reality. And yeah, so it starts with a spark or an idea or something, and then working backwards from that. And that could be in many areas in terms of a creative effect, or it could be a workflow idea, or it could be something like what we do at Relab, which is the emulations of classic gear. It could be, well, I wish there was an emulation of this product because that's not available in the box yet, or no one's done a good version of it yet, or we want to make a better version of it. So yeah, it can start from many different angles, but I think ultimately you want something that you can't have for whatever reason, and work backwards from that.
Makes sense, man.
Yeah.
But so creating a plugin, do you also have to consider like the ease of use and all that? Because obviously plugins can become really complicated. I mean, I guess there's a lot of user experience things you have to consider, right?
Yeah, and considering the market and who you're aiming it for, like there are certain people that are kind of tweak heads, and they'll want to get really deep in the settings and do crazy things or really creative things. And then there's going to be the people that just have to work quickly. Maybe they're very busy, or they just don't want to get bogged down with that complexity. And you have to work out what your market is, and also the user base and the user's experience. And I think that both of those things have a place, as long as you're targeting the right type of people for the right type of product. I think that it's not really like a right or wrong answer. But what I would say is that the majority of high level professionals like to be able to work quickly and move on. So I think even within a complex plugin, you want it to be easy enough to use that the professionals can kind of dial in a sound very quickly and come back to it and work in that way, because no one wants to spend a couple of hours on, one sound on one instrument. So yeah, whatever you're doing, you have to kind of work with that paradigm. But at Relab, we're starting to work on making sure that we have a kind of quick workflow and entry level stripped down versions of our plugins. So
Right.
a couple of months ago, we released LX480 Essentials, which is our emulation of that classic, vintage lexicon sound. and the Essentials is a stripped down version of that. So we've taken away a lot of the complexity out of it and basically stripped it down to 5 sliders, the most
cool.
used ones, and they're based on 4 of the kind of most popular presets in the original hardware, and people are then tweaking and adjusting from that preset rather than having to set every single parameter. So yeah, I think it's important to have that side of the market and have the side where people want to go deep, and we really want people that have the extended version, to be able to also have access to the stripped down version, because those professionals might in different circumstances need both. One day they'll really need to tweak deeply on a sound, and then the next day they're like, well, I just want a plate sound, so just being able to get that very, very quickly is also important. So if you get the expanded version, the LX480 complete, then you also get the stripped down version. So yeah, it's like a tiered system, and that's our way of trying to make sure that we look after all of those people.
Yeah. Makes total sense, man. But so with your own plugin, what has been the journey so far? Then have there been a lot of not issues, not the word I'm looking for, but been a lot of hurdles to climb, or has it been smooth sailing from the start, or have you learned a lot? Have there been any good mistakes that made you learn even more?
Yeah, I mean, it's been like climbing a mountain, and you get to one peak and you think you're at the peak, and then you look over and you're like, oh God, there's another peak. And it's just been, consistently every time you think, oh, I'm getting quite good at this now, you then end up, you end up in a position where you just see the next mountain after, and you realize you were just at base camp before, and
Exactly.
For me, the biggest thing was underestimating the math side of digital signal processing. So I came into the masters that I was doing without having to done any maths for maybe 10-15 years, and going into that and then doing kind of high level mathematics quite quickly, that really was difficult for me. Not necessarily because I had problems with maths, but it was more that everyone else, or the majority of other people, had come out of computer science or engineering undergraduate straight out, and they had a good grasp on that. And I, coming from a producer background, hadn't done any of that for years and years, and never to that degree. So it was, I had to spend 3 or 4 times longer than everyone else to just kind of catch up. So I'd go into some of the math lectures and come out of it going, I understood next to nothing of that. And then I would work hard to understand, and then during the week, and then come back in feeling confident, and then my hopes are destroyed within 10 minutes when they move on to new stuff. But by the end of the term, I kind of was starting, because I did all of that legwork, I actually started to get to the point where I was actually even more confident some of the other people, because I just had to work harder. And that meant probably I was fresher because I'd immediately studied it. So I managed to turn it around, but yeah, it was very difficult. And then the other side of things that's difficult is, even learning to work out where bugs are and create code that is consistent. And, with digital signal processing code, it's a lot more difficult to do things like unit testing and other types of testing than in other areas. Like you were saying that you do a lot of iOS development. It's probably a lot easier to do that style of testing on that sort of code. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I know people that do that regularly and do that a lot. But, with a lot of this signal processing, especially when you're dealing with modulation and other unpredictable events, it is very difficult to get complete coverage of that sort of stuff. So it involves, a lot of the times it can be really frustrating when you get an obscure bug and trying to find where the hell it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. But so going back to the math, because that's exactly what I've been thinking, and I'm not experiencing really yet, but because I also feel like, I haven't done a computer science degree. My math, I don't feel it's at a very high level at all. And sometimes I also feel like, I'm lacking maybe what some other employees have. uh, like you said. But so how did you, like you said, you worked really hard with the math, but where did you start? Like how did you get good at math? I mean, beyond just working hard, there must have been some other thing in there, I guess.
Well, two things is one, I still feel a little bit of imposter syndrome in the sense of
Right,
like my
right.
maths is definitely still one of the weaker areas of everything, but I can hold my own now, have conversations, and feel like I'm, you know, able to do most of what I need to. And if I'm reading a paper, I don't just look at it and just like my head wants to explode. I can actually take my time with it and get through it and understand
Mm.
things. So the big thing for me is to just get started, because everyone's intimidated by the maths, and I think a lot of people don't start because they're worried about that. And my answer was like, I came in kind of naive to it, and I didn't really realize the undertaking. And then that meant that I just had to deal with it. I just had to do it. And I think if I'd have done more research ahead of time, I probably wouldn't have even started. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
done some coding, and I'd learned the basics of C++, even going into the masters. But yeah, the math side of things I'd kind of neglected. And yeah, my advice to that is to just start making things and start, because if you just are reading textbooks all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you never feel ready, and it takes making those mistakes practically. Like, come up with a project that you want to do that's feasible and just start doing it, because all of those little gaps in knowledge start to appear. And the other thing that was important for me was the Feynman technique. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's a learning
No.
technique where after you've learned something, you pretend you're having to say it to a young child, like a 5-year-old or 10-year-old
Right.
child, and explain that concept back like a teacher would. And the whole idea there is that if you can take this complex mathematical idea, or the obviously the algebraic expressions, and kind of take this DSP knowledge and break it down into a problem that people without the technical knowledge can understand, that you know it yourself. And that was very, very useful for me, because, and
Mm.
I even found, with a lot of tutorials, both online and in lectures, is that, a lot of the lecturers know that area so well that sometimes, after a period of time, they forget what it's like to be an absolute beginner on things. So I took it upon myself to go, well, how would I explain this concept I've learned about to someone like that? And that was really good for me to be able to feel like I was starting to understand.
Mm. No, that's an awesome tip. Really good. But so for someone like me, then in this case, where would I start, or anyone who is a beginner at math? Where do you start? Like, do you go to algebra? Do you go? Where do you start? Just to get a start, essentially, to refresh your math.
Well, first of all, I think you should start by having fun. So,
Yeah.
I think it's good to get a good start with C++ and coding, and
Mm.
doing something fun, so that it's very easy if you start with all the maths to just get disheartened with it and give up. And I think you have to break this down. Like, if you're learning an instrument, you would probably do technical practice on your instrument. You'll do ear training. You'll actually learn songs. And you kind of need this multidisciplined approach with plugin development when you're first starting. Is you need to do, your technique, which is like your C++ coding. You need to do your maths, which is almost like your ear training and theory
Right.
training along with it. And you also need to learn songs. So that's like following along with
Yeah. Yeah.
tutorials to actually make something. And then also you've got the songwriting element of taking what you've learned from all of those disciplines, and then learning to actually do something new and creative with it. So I think if you treat it like learning an instrument, you can't go far wrong. And if you're just handling one of those things, you might get good in one area, but you kind of need to handle them, in my opinion anyway, handle them all simultaneously. And if you go
Mm.
too far, just heavy on one path, you end up not getting the broad knowledge that you need. And
Yeah.
again, like, musical knowledge is really important, because, knowing, how the theory of sound is, works, like simple things like, what's a sine wave, cosine waves, what understanding the relationships to that, and trigonometry, understanding the relationships between things like period, wavelength, sampling rate, bit depth. You need to kind of, to do any digital signal processing, you need to have that stuff already ingrained. So yeah, it takes a multidisciplined approach to get that. But to answer less diplomatically and more specific to the maths, I would say algebra is extremely important. Okay. And being able to see an equation and be able to work with it and rearrange it and work with it in that sense and solve equations is very, very important, because you're going to see things like complex exponentials all over the place. You're going to see things like summations all over the place, and understanding not only how they work but also the symbols for those sorts of concepts is really important, because if you don't, a lot of the papers express those things algebraically, and they express it as equations rather than in plain language. And a lot of the times these, if you're looking at academic papers, they kind of don't assume that they assume that you know what you're talking about already, and that can be very daunting. But there is a few really good books that I could recommend. Will Perkle has one called Designing Audio Effects Plugins in C++. That's a fantastic book, and that's really practical and hands-on, and it explains some of that maths in a really intuitive way, and it's not as technical in that sense, so it's really approachable. So I liked that. There's another book that's just come out. It's another Focal Press book. I think it's called Digital Audio Theory. So if you it's from a University of Miami lecturer, and basically it goes through a lot of that theory of sound stuff that you need. So talking about sampling rates, bit depths, talking about aliasing, and talking about things like Fourier transforms and fast Fourier transforms, and all of that prerequisite knowledge. So that's an approachable book. And then finally, Hack Audio by Eric Tarr. And that, again, a Focal Press book. But this is primarily written around MATLAB, the prototyping language. So all of the examples are in that, which makes it a bit more approachable than C++. And that's very good for learning that kind of introduction to computer programming, and also some of the maths behind signal processing. So, yeah. And the final resources I'd recommend is Josh Hodges, the audio programmer, Discord group and YouTube channel. I found that invaluable to me.
Oh yeah, I've seen him actually on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Nice, man. Yeah. No, but that's awesome. I'm gonna check those resources out. But then you said in the beginning you're doing machine learning. I guess that's even heavier math, right? Like for me, I'm not an expert at all when it comes to machine learning, but it feels like that's a word or a field of programming that's become really fashionable, right? But what is it really like? What is the machine learning doing in a sound audio environment? Like, what are you working on, for example?
Yeah, so I'm working on trying to work out if something called neural architecture search, which was kind of pioneered by one of the sub departments of Google, whether it can find new novel architectures for creating models of analog gear. So let's say you have an 1176 compressor. Can it make a model of that that's better than the ones that we currently have? But machine learning sounds more intimidating than it is, and it sounds more mathematical than it is. Right. And if we oversimplify it a little bit and consider it like machine learning is like continued trial and error, but because computers can do it so much faster than we can, they can end up with models through that trial and error and constantly updating its model and going, well, how close was I? And trying to find, that global minima where the amount of error compared to, the actual device is at its minimal. So yeah, machine learning really in the context of how I'm using it, because there's obviously other areas and other types of models and things you can be doing with it, and obviously how that extends to kind of the parent category of artificial intelligence in general. But yeah, I just like to think of it in this context as like repeated trial and error. And when you approach it like that, then it seems a lot less daunting. And with the signal processing stuff that I've done, a lot of the equations and formulas felt quite familiar quite quickly. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's very technical, but it's not unapproachable if you've kind of done a base level of study. And there's a really good course on Coursera. That's on machine learning in MATLAB. That's very, very good, and it's deep enough in the theory to really feel like you're understanding what's going on, but not so complex that you lose yourself in it. So yeah, that was been a big part of the last few months, is going through that, and also an edX course in Python to kind of brush up on that side as well.
Right, awesome, man. Are you familiar with I think I'm pronouncing his name correct. I guess it's Gil Weinberg. He's machine learning at Google. He did that he's done a few actually, like a few robots, like really cool robots who, I guess it's machine learning. I guess AI also, but like he has made robots who can play with people. So they're able to listen, and do their math and they're able to play with a human. And then he made like this prototype for a drummer who lost his arm. They were able to help him and build some really cool robot that made him play drums, like feeling like it was a hand again. So we're talking about getting him on the podcast also, but I just wonder if you're familiar with him, because
I'm not. But I'd love to, know more about him. So if you've got any links for me, I'd love to check it.
Yeah. I'll send you some stuff, man. It looks really cool, actually.
Yeah.
But so, because I did a tiny bit of a course on machine learning, and you see from my knowledge from doing that tiny bit of work, it seems to be a lot of statistics. I mean, I don't want to boil it down and say, oh, it's just statistic, but isn't it, like you said, seeing what's right and wrong and drawing a line between and trying to come as close to the real data point?
I mean, a lot of machine learning starts with these types of models and statistics. So, that type is quite often called linear regression. So you're trying to find the kind of line of best fit through some data. So, obviously data science is all over machine learning, or machine learning is all over data science. And for obvious reasons, is if you've got to try and find best fits of things, then computers can, see patterns better than we can in a quick period of time like that. And, also the it's weird to say computers are thinking, because they're not really thinking, but they can see things and in multi dimensions, or spot things better than we can, and make models that are more accurate. It's very difficult for us to go past 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions. Like our heads want to explode. But dealing with all of those different parameters, it can find solutions that we might not necessarily be able to find. So I think that a lot of those courses start with a lot of data science and statistics, because these are common problems and they're easy to comprehend to begin with. But the applications of it will always involve statistics, but the applications of it could be far and wide, from things like autonomous cars to this tiny little niche that I'm living in with trying to make better audio effects models.
Yeah. No, it's super fascinating, man. Like, really, really fascinating. But so, how are you able to do the relab stuff, program, do a master's? How do you structure your day to do all this?
So basically I'm doing 10 to 20 hours a week for relab, and then the rest of the time is on the PhD. And I feel like I don't know what I've let myself in for, because as I get further through the PhD, I'm going to be working more and more hours. But at the moment, it's manageable. But I obviously don't have a lot of time for anything else. But what my day usually looks like is my role with Relab is a lot on the organizational side. So I'm not coding every day, and that stuff has to take all of your concentration, and you have to be really committed to it, doing it 8-10 hours a day, 5 days a week, or whatever you're doing, because to really get your teeth into a big project takes a lot of hours. Whereas a lot of the stuff that I'm doing doesn't involve coding day to day. I'll do bits here and there with prototyping and things like security stuff with Pace and iLock and things like that, working with JUCE projects. But I'm mainly helping to kind of guide the vision on the creation of a product or updates to a product, kind of like a product manager type of role. And overseeing those things. So I'm dealing with graphic designers and giving them specs and writing specs for them, asking the development team to do certain tasks. And that means that I can kind of do a couple of hours a day on that stuff, get them to be doing what they need to do, and then reassess. And it's more structural management. I think if I had to be doing day-to-day coding and a PhD, there would be absolutely no way on earth that I could do that simultaneously. I'd certainly look a lot more depressed than I. Hopefully, I don't look that depressed.
No.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean, man. That would be. I mean, because I feel after a day of coding, your brain is fried, and it's only. I mean, I feel I don't know what you feel, but I feel I can be really focused for maybe like 4 hours. If I can do 4 hours really focused, that's sort of my limit. Then I get slower. I don't know what's your preference.
Yeah. So I worked out after a while, and so from the kind of second lockdown here in the UK during the pandemic, is that I started to look after my health a lot more, and I used to take long walks, before the gyms reopened, with an audiobook and some weights in a backpack, and I was just continuously listening to audiobooks. And there was I like to listen to stuff on business and productivity stuff outside of maths and coding and music for a bit. And there was one particular concept in one of the books, and I can't even remember which book it was in now, but saying that if you break your chunks into really dense, concentrated time and then take enough breaks, you get more longevity. So I now try to structure my time where I'll try not to do much more than an hour and a half in that deep, like, focus zone. Then take 10 or 15 minutes, have a walk around or grab a coffee or a tea or something, and then come back to it. And I find that extends the amount of time I can be productive. But when you're heavy into these sorts of things, I think you're right, is that there's only a certain window that you can manage, even when you're kind of very productive. And then you're better off doing your simple admin tasks, whether that's replying to emails. And I tend to batch that stuff out. So I try not to be like distracted by anything. Like, my phone will be in a different room. I'll have, closed all social media tabs and everything. And I'll just try to get focused, because if my focus goes and I'm distracted all the time, I just don't do any quality of work. And I spend the whole day feeling like I've worked. But then if I was to look at what I've actually done, it's really not actually getting me closer to my goals. And if you reply to everything really quickly, you then get a response really quickly. And then that, in a sense, not only is it not helping you to get focused, your day-to-day work done, but it also kind of, in some way, subconsciously trains other people to come to you with problems, because they know that you'll respond quickly, and it's like subconsciously off their heads and their minds, so that they can be doing other things. So I think by batching emails at a couple of set times, that's really important to me, so I'm not distracted by all of that stuff.
No, that makes total sense, man. And what do you think about, like, having to work 8 hours a day for a job? I mean, is it really, is it still a valid thing to have? How should I phrase it? Is that still a valid way of working, I should say. I mean, those 8 hours, does it really matter these days, or does the output matter more? Does it matter how long and how short it takes for you to complete
Yeah.
that task?
So I think really it comes down to, well, what's your job and what's the type of task? Because
Mm.
in creative heuristic types of jobs, it actually, if you're watching the clock, you're like clocking in, clocking out at set times. Like that might not be when you're most creative. That might not be when the ideas come. You might be tired, and having some level of autonomy of your time and when you do things and how you do things, I think can be very, very beneficial in those types of tasks. But then there are other things, other tasks that are very much more procedural, where if you follow almost like a step-by-step breakdown of you do X and you do Y, then you do Z, you end up with what you need. Those sorts of tasks are hard to motivate in any other way. So I think that's when, you have to be maybe to a certain degree watched over a bit more or motivated in other ways when it's a little less creative. So I think there are pros and cons to both approaches, but certainly I think programming and signal processing is fundamentally, whilst it's a technical task, it's also a very creative task, because there are many ways that you could do things, and some people are going to do things more efficiently than others. And yeah, for me, I'm lucky enough to be able to work when I want, as long as I kind of meet what's required of me. So some weeks I'll work at weekends, some I'll work in the evening, just when I've got the time and I'm feeling creative and I can do it. And that's really, really important to me to have that. And I'm very lucky to work for a company like Relab where I can do that. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of plugin companies and audio developers are working in a similar way. When you've got a small team, it becomes harder and harder, I think, when your teams get bigger and bigger. But yeah, certainly I work in that way, and I prefer to work in that way. But not everyone in Relab is like that. Some people, especially if they have kids and families, that they need to be able to work in certain set hours so that they get that other family time. So I think it's got to be flexible enough to work for everyone.
Yeah, totally, man. But something I want to ask you, I mean, this is going back a bit, but we talked about, not having a computer science degree, stuff like that. Do you think, because I've been talking to my fiance about that, because she works in tech also, and with some really, great programmers and computer scientists, but they also, I think she told me, like, even they sometimes, not question, but say there's not really any point doing a computer science degree these days. And I mean, like you and me, we haven't done it, and you can
Yeah.
still get your way into the industry anyway. So I mean, yeah, what's your point in that? Do you feel like you miss it? I mean, maybe not at this point anymore, but what's your opinion on that?
I mean, that could easily transcend into a conversation on how important is formal education as well, because,
Yeah.
you have to look at the value of what you're doing. And I think those concepts are important, but are they presented in, a typical computer science degree, will take 4 years, and it's like 4 years full time. Should it really take that long?
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
also the matter of stuff changing so fast in computers also, I guess.
yeah, but I think a lot of the core and the fundamental ideas,
Yeah.
have held up for a long, long time. And I think they teach it in such a way that is, you're thinking about ideas and concepts, whether that's like data structures and algorithms and common ways to think about problems, and kind of that sort of thing can be very, very important. And so you're looking at the different sorting and searching algorithms and stuff. I think that can be extremely important information, and I think that that's very beneficial. However, I have to say that these people like I don't know if you've heard of this, but a kind of blogger called Scott Young. He did what's called the MIT challenge. He made this challenge for himself. He calls himself like a super learner, and he did the whole of the MIT computer science degree in 1 year instead of
Wow.
4. And he developed his own kind of workarounds for being able to do that. Obviously, he's a very intelligent guy, but he wouldn't say that is only available to him. It's not like he's off the charts intellectually. He's still a kind of approachable, real person, He's done other challenges like learning a bunch of languages in a year and going living in places, and other little like kind of learning challenges. And basically you think, well, if someone like that can do the whole MIT course using their open lectures, so you can watch all the lectures for free, and then if he can do the whole thing in a year, then you think, well, hold on, is it worth getting into that much debt for that much that long a period of time? And there are validity concerns there. The only thing I would say is it takes a lot of kind of self-drive and desire and will to be able to do that without the level of being accountable and held accountable for things. So having deadlines and coursework that has to be in at certain times and getting feedback on that and being accountable to someone else for it, I think that's the biggest reason to go to university. And I actually almost think that by the time you're certainly at masters, you should be self-directing your learning as much as being in lectures anyway, and it's more about filling in the blanks for you and working in ways that's going to benefit you and trying to be smart about that. But there is a level of accountability that's very difficult to self-direct. So I think that for me is the biggest part, of why you might want to go to university. And I think that answering that question has to be very much a personal choice of, well, am I the sort of person that can self-direct things? Am I going to have to stay in power, or do I need to be accountable to someone? And I think that's really the biggest reason, less so than do I really need the knowledge, because I really feel like at university you should be finding the knowledge you want and finding a way to work that into whatever you're working on. Because again, certainly in the masters that I was doing, is I didn't have modules on JUCE specifically. There were mathematics and signal processing modules and audio programming modules, and we were working primarily with an embedded system called Bella, which was developed by Queen Mary University. And so most of my programming stuff was on that. So I had to basically find ways to self-direct that. So I set up a society for audio programming, and lots of the music students that were there and the sound engineering students that are. So basically at the University of West London, there's the London College of Music there. So lots of people that are into sort of music production from a more artistic perspective. But then you've got the sound engineering students that are technically in the School of Computing and Engineering. So they're much more technical, and you handle a lot more of the deeper theory. But we had people from both departments coming in and kind of, working together to do programming tasks and working with JUCE. And I arranged guest lectures from people like Eric Tarr that wrote the Hack Audio book, and Joshua Hodge, and some people from JUCE themselves came down to give some lectures, and even had weekend workshops and things like that. So I found ways to self-direct it to make it what I needed it to be. And I think that's really what university is all about. So if you're just looking out for like, okay, I'm going to take this course and it's all going to be perfect and I'm going to end up in the perfect job, I think you're looking at it slightly wrong. I think you should, treat it a little bit more openly and working to fill your own blanks where you need them, as if you were self-directing it.
Yeah, no, terrific answer. I think that makes perfect sense, actually. It really does. But so before we wrap up, hopefully this is a short question-ish, but talking about problem solving, because you mentioned it, and that's always a huge part of anything you do, like even if it's music, down to recording or producing plugins, whatever. How do you approach a problem? And it might be not a short question answer.
Well, I mean, I think it starts with having an endpoint in mind. So I think a lot of people go into going, I want to create X thing, and they don't really know, where they want to go exactly. Like someone could say, I want to create a plugin, or they could say, I want to create a distortion plugin, but they have no real idea about like, well, what style of distortion do you want? Like, how do you want it to sound beyond that? And I think having that starting point in mind and that end point in mind, and then working out, well, how could I break this problem down into smaller chunks? So, obviously, as you've done a fair amount of programming, like breaking things into smaller problems, like classes for different things or different functions for different parts of that, and compartmentalizing a big problem into a series of smaller problems, and starting with that in mind is that, well, that stage of going from having nothing to having a distortion plugin, you've got to break that big problem up into a bunch of smaller ones. And then once you have one problem solved, then I think you go, well, is there a more efficient way I could be doing that? Can I optimize that somehow? Is there clever ways that I could be doing this? And just constantly giving yourself that enforcement of trying to be better than you currently are. And then, being methodical in, when things are going wrong, debugging something is you have to think very logically about, well, this goes here, that goes there, then it goes here. And being able to work out ways to, test things. We've talked about kind of unit testing, but trying to find ways to give it some inputs that very easily what the output should be to test that. And then if you don't get that, stepping through it with a debugger to work out, well, why am I not getting that? And I think that systematic approach as well. So you're learning 3 or 4 things. You're learning how to break a big problem up into small ones. When things are going wrong, you're taking a problem and basically breaking that up into, again, even smaller things, of working almost line by line and seeing the point where it goes wrong. And then also that idea of trying to think abstractly about a problem to see if there are any ways to optimize that. So I think if you have those kind of 3 or 4 core areas down, that helps you to solve complex problems in a way that is a bit easier than kind of just trying to solve the whole thing at once.
Definitely, yeah. That's awesome, man. I mean, do you think? Because I've been wondering, because that's also been my approach to do it, and sometimes I wonder, is this making me a better logical thinker, or because there's no way, well, maybe there is, but it's not like, let's say learn an instrument, you can tell, oh, I'm getting faster, therefore this practice is working out for me. But sometimes it's hard to quantify if you are becoming a more logical thinker, right?
Yeah, but the idea there is like, well, just because you have technique, does that make you a good player? Like, it's how you put things into practice. Like, I guess the technique and getting faster is like, well, how quickly can I write a code that does this? But actually, is it achieving what you wanted it to achieve? Is it performing the function that you wanted it to? And is it doing it in an optimal way? So, again, like if you want to be a blues rock guitarist, learning scales and getting faster is not the only part that makes you a successful blues guitarist, right? You got to understand the pentatonics and the bends, and knowing how to put the feel in the right ways. And it's that same thing to coding and programming, is like, where do you put the feel in? Where do you get your personality in there? And like most people will think about computer programming as a very only a systematic approach, but there are millions of ways to solve a problem. And there might be 10, 20, 100 correct ways that you could do it. But ultimately, it comes down to a certain personal preference. It comes down to artistic vision and what you're trying to achieve. And I think, there are more parallels between music and programming than maybe appear at first.
Definitely, man.
Yeah.
No, it's super fascinating. But Peter, thank you for taking time. It's been a real pleasure, and really look forward to trying a plugin when it's out. So
thank you.
Let me know. Yeah. Are you looking to release it this year, or there's no deadline?
There's no deadline, and that's mainly because my priority is with the relab work and the PhD. But I'll probably, my vacation this year might be just going away and just finishing that off. Maybe I'll like book somewhere in the country for 2 weeks and just kind of hold myself up and and just crack on with that and get it done. But yeah, like it's that for me was about a learning process, and it's less about it actually being commercially successful or whatever. But I do want to get it out because I do want to, put something out into the world that I can be proud of. But yeah, there's no set timeline on that.
Awesome, man. But yeah, it makes sense. So yeah, but I still look forward to trying
Yeah,
it.
I'll send it over once I've got something that you can have a play.
Awesome, man. But yeah, thanks again, Peter. And yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, great to speak to you. See you later.
You too, man. Thank you, Peter, for coming on to the show. It was great talking to you, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed it as well. Again, feel free to subscribe to YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you're listening or watching this show. Your support really matters and really helps, and we're growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. And also, if you want to get exclusive access to interviews before the public, please check out the Audio Tribe email list. There's a link to that in the description below. You send your name and email address and you have joined. It's completely free, of course. But that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'll see you next week again. So take care. See you soon.